Okay, well, today we are going to talk about writing the discussion section of a paper. And this is the last main section of your APA style paper to write. And maybe I would say this is the most fun section to write as well. There are still rules and things you need to be sure that you cover, but you get to be a little bit more creative. We've been waiting to finally be a little bit more creative, and this is the section to do it. So the discussion section discusses your paper and your research findings. You will be interpreting and evaluating the meaning of your results and drawing conclusions about those results. And this is where you get to think about, what do you believe your results mean? Why do you think these results are important? Why do you think you got the results you did? This is where you get to put your own ideas really kind of in a creative way into the paper. However, because these are your ideas, you want to write the discussion in a way that we would say is skeptical, remembering that interpretations may vary. Just because you see the results in a certain way, someone else may read your research and say, I wonder if they got the results because of this particular methodological flaw. Maybe they see a flaw in your study design, or maybe it's due to your specific sample. And so remember, we never talk about things like, we have proved this, we know this to be true. We use those words like, our results suggest, it is possible that, our results imply, and that's what we mean when we're saying be skeptical. So in your discussion section, you're going to discuss the following pieces of information. We're going to have your research hypothesis. You're going to restate it there. Your results in a very basic way. You're going to tie your results back to the literature, implications, limitations, and future directions. And so we'll go ahead and talk about this. Let's see here. So again, you're going to start with, what was the original purpose of your research? Remember, some people only read the discussion section. So you're going to give them a sentence. This research study examined whatever it was. How hours of sleep affects test scores. Again, a very simple sentence. And then you're going to discuss whether your results support your hypothesis. And so you would be saying something like, it was hypothesized that getting 8 hours of sleep would lead to higher test scores than getting 0 hours of sleep, and results were consistent with that hypothesis. Or something like, our results were consistent with our hypothesis that students who received 8 hours of sleep had higher test scores than those who received 0 hours of sleep. Something like that. Or maybe you were inconsistent. The results do not support our hypothesis, right? Again, straightforward and very clear. If your results don't support your hypothesis, this is when you're going to start thinking about why. Why not? Do you think there was a problem with your methodology? Do you think there was an issue with your sample? Do you think your hypothesis was incorrect? Typically you've done a lot of reading that helped you come to the hypothesis that you arrived at. But maybe you were wrong. Maybe after you got your results, you do more reading and read more of the literature and you think, maybe I was wrong about that. So you're going to be thinking about why your results don't support your hypothesis. And this is then where it really brings us right to interpreting your results. What do they mean? And this is, again, up to you. If we were really doing a study on sleep and test scores, why do you think, what does that mean? Are you looking at it from a brain perspective, that your brain, needs to sleep and consolidate your memories? Are we talking about it from a physiological point of view, about your body being tired? Are we thinking about it in a more holistic way, that people who sleep more maybe take better care of themselves and therefore, I don't know, may end up doing better on tests for a number of reasons? Again, you're going to be thinking about what these results mean, and each of you may have a different interpretation. And you can talk about if they did not support your findings, again, why. That's where you're going to be coming up to maybe methodological issues or things like that. You do want to tie your findings into the research literature. Again, you may have, in a real research study, may have read 50 papers and have 50 citations. That won't be the case in our papers in this class, but you want to go back and tie your findings back to the 1 or 2 or 3 papers that you read for this study. So you might say something like, if you read a study by Smith, let's say, on sleeping and test grades, you might say, our results were similar to findings by Smith, and then in parentheses the date, let's say 2010. However, Smith's study was a correlational survey study, and we did, so we have extended the findings of his study, or of that study. So you're going to say, were we consistent with what you read? Were our results not consistent? And the real way to write a good discussion section, this is the time where you have to think deeply. If you just have the sentence, our results were consistent with the study by Smith in 2010, that's a very average statement. I mean, if I was grading it, it's like a C, right? What you want to do is explain, how were our results similar? And then how were they different? How did they add something to our knowledge? So that's the difference between maybe like a C and an A. And again, maybe that's the case in this class in terms of grading, but in terms of real research writing, if you're going to get your paper published or not, if you stay just on the very surface level, these are our results, they were consistent with other people's studies, the end, that's really not going to be a paper that will get published. You need to think deeply. These are our results. In this way, they were consistent, but we're adding to the literature. This is what we found that's new. That's kind of the next step that you're trying to write about. Part 5, practical applications of your research, or we also call this section implications. Why is this important? That's what this section is. Why should anybody care? What are the practical applications of this research? If you find that sleep is important for test scores, then it may be important to say something like, these results would be important for students, parents, teachers, college administrators, to maybe do public service announcements and let students know about the importance of sleep impacting test scores. You're kind of explaining how and who might need to know this information. So that's a very important part, right? Again, this research is made for everyone, not just for you as a researcher. So should there be posters on college campuses reminding people during finals week? Sleep, right? Sleep, your grade might depend on it, something like that. Then the last section, and this is typically maybe put into one paragraph, limitations and future directions. We always have a little section on limitations because no study is perfect. You have to remember that from the very beginning. No research study is perfect. And so if you even do a research study where you have a grant and you've had $10 million and 5 years to complete a study, it still won't be perfect. It's just impossible. So we highlight some of the limitations. Now, I will say that research methods students, undergraduate students, I find they're typically the very best at finding limitations. And so sometimes I read papers that the whole paper is 4 pages and then I have 6 pages of limitations. Okay, that's not how we want to write it. You're going to look at your study, and of course, particularly in this class, this is not a perfect study, right? We're doing things the best we can in a way that we can do it as a college class. And so we are going to take maybe the top 3 limitations you can think of. And those are the ones you're going to talk about. You're not going to list 100 limitations. If you list 100 limitations, you're basically saying, well, this paper stinks. And if you were trying to get it published, people would say, why would I publish this? They just told me so many things that were wrong with it. So you're going to come up with the most important limitations, 1, 2, or 3 of them. And they need to be meaningful. Again, this is where you have to think. If you're going to say, maybe you didn't get a significant result, maybe you didn't find a difference in test scores between the 8 hours of sleep group in your study and the 0 hours of sleep group in your study. And you say, well, one of the limitations was the sample. Again, that's a very average statement. Why? The question is why, and you need to look at that and say, if I look at this, I see that all of these are college students and they all have high GPAs maybe, and so maybe we don't see this effect of sleep affecting test scores because these were all just very capable, intelligent students, and one night of sleep really isn't going to affect them. So maybe I need to, in the future directions, pick a sample that has more variety in IQ or intelligence or GPA or something like that. So again, you need to think about if you say, well, there was a limitation because I studied only females. Well, is that really a limitation? I mean, it's a limitation in terms of we maybe could only generalize the results to other females, but your results may be applicable to females. And in fact, we often do that with a study. We often do that with a study in that we study small groups. Maybe we only do a particular study in females and only do a particular study in males because we can understand how these mechanisms, let's say it's a medication. Medication may work very differently in the body of a female compared to a male. And so we might want to study only females, only males, only children, only adults, right? Because we want to see how these things affect certain groups of people. So your limitations should be thoughtful limitations. If it's a study that you designed and there seemed to be a question that people were confused about, well, then maybe you want to write about that. You know, question 3 on the study I had a lot of participants asking questions about that, and perhaps that skewed our results. So you're looking for methodological limitations. And again, you have to explain why. That's really the key, is not only state the limitation or the implication, but why. And then future directions, I like to end on future directions. Some people leave on limitations, and I feel like it's sort of a bummer way to end a paper. And these are the problems with our study. You can really do it either way, but I particularly like to end on future directions because it's a hopeful, kind of happy way to end the paper. So you've discussed the limitations and then the future directions. Now the future directions should do more than just simply correct the limitations. So if you say, the limitation was that I only had college students, university students, and everybody had a GPA of 3.5 or above, and I think that's a limitation. My future direction shouldn't just be, so next time I will find participants who have a more of a variety of GPAs. Okay. You can write that, but the future directions really should be imagine you are a real researcher in this area. This is your career. And where would you go from here? What would your next study be? Right? So you might think about anything, right? If again, I was doing this study on how does sleep affect test performance, and I did it in a laboratory, and I have my people who got to sleep no hours the night before the test, and my group who got to sleep 8 hours the night before the test. Well, maybe I would want to say, I understand that getting 0 hours of sleep maybe leads to lower test scores than 8 hours of sleep. Now I'd like to look at many more, more variety, like a group that gets 0 hours of sleep, 1 hour of sleep, 2 hours of sleep, 3 hours, right? Where's the cutoff between 0 and 8? Is it that you can get, as long as you get any, like the 0 group would perform worse than any other group, as long as you get any amount of sleep, you do okay? Or maybe you need to get at least 3 or 4 hours of sleep. Anybody who was below that would do poorly on the test. These are questions maybe I would want to answer. Or maybe I'd be interested in brain waves. We want to do the test in the morning using EEGs. So we would be studying the brain waves to see what's going on in the brain when the students are taking the test. What's the difference in brain waves between students who got 0 hours of sleep or 8 hours of sleep? Or maybe we'd want to do this on a different group of people. Maybe now instead of college students, we'd want to see if we get the same effect in third graders, right? So that's really the idea of a future direction, is to say, where would I go from here? Or I did a laboratory study. Maybe now I want to actually go and do some kind of field research in the real world on a real college campus. So anyhow, those are the ideas. As you're writing, your first paragraph, again, is your brief reminder of the research, your sample, and the hypothesis. So I'm giving you an outline here that will be good for this class. And again, as you become more familiar with writing, you can mix it up a little bit and add more to it. But this is a good basic discussion section. So you refer to the research that you conducted. The present study was conducted on, you fill that in. Describe an overview of your sample. You want to be sure to comment on any unusual features of your sample. Don't just report your results. The discussion should be more commentary. So instead of saying 95% of our sample was female, 5% was male, your discussion, because you're discussing it should be something like, it should be noted that the vast majority, 95% of our sample, was female. Okay? And then you state your hypothesis, exactly the same hypothesis you stated already in the introduction section. We hypothesized what? The second paragraph, this is the discussion of your results of your statistical test, and you're going to describe the results in words, maybe referring to your table or your figure. So figure 1 shows what? You report the results of your significance test and whether they support your hypothesis, but you're not using any numbers here. So the results, right, what did we find? We found that students who slept 8 hours performed better on the test than students who slept 0 hours the night before the test, and those results supported our hypothesis. And then here you go with your interpretation. These results suggest that what? If your results are significant, discuss what your results mean in words, but be careful not to imply that your hypothesis is the whole story. This is the idea of being cautious and skeptical in your writing. Keep in mind the idea of causal inference. If we didn't do a true experiment, you cannot say the word cause or effect. But you want to state the strongest possibility, but also understand that it's not the only possibility. Okay, and so you're going to again be thinking, it is possible that, it's our results suggest that, but understand that there may be other explanations as well. If your results were not significant, you might speculate about other factors that may have been working. You can mention any anomalies about your sample, but don't assume that your hypothesis would be confirmed with a larger or better sample, right? So you can't just say, well, I think there was a problem with my sample, and if I did this study again, we'd find significant results. Compare your research. Are your findings consistent with previous studies? And that's those articles that you read. So whatever articles are in your introduction section, you're going to pull them back into your discussion section. At least one of them needs to be there. And then real world implications. How does this research translate into practical applications in the real world? What is the broader significance? Why is this important? Right? If this study, we may be saying something like, college students are known to have carry a heavy sleep debt, meaning they don't sleep enough. They're up late with their, doing whatever they're doing, then they're up early for classes. Of course, you would need references for that. And so this is very important because we can see that their college students' grades may be impacted by their sleep habits, right? Which can have huge implications for their future academic and career goals, right? So something about their real world implications. And then paragraph 3 would be, or the last would be critiquing your research, discussing measurement issues, or any of the survey or the experiment that may have affected your results. Maybe discuss a question that was worded poorly, but be careful here. The idea here is to show that you understand some of the weaknesses of your study, but not to sound as though this was an incompetent effort, right? Every study has limitations, and that's okay. So you're just kind of acknowledging these were some of the things that maybe we could have done better. Nonetheless, our results are still important. This is where you might discuss sampling issues, pointing out weaknesses, but doing so thoughtfully. And then, like I said, end on a good note, which would be talking about future research. Treat this as a pilot study or a first study and say how you would carry this project forward to make the next project better. More than just fixing your limitations, but try to make a thoughtful and realistic statement. If you have trouble getting started in your discussion section, you can always start by cutting and pasting from the rest of your paper and then changing the wording. You don't want the same sentences from your intro to your discussion, but you have to talk about what your study was about. You could get that from your intro, what your hypothesis was, what are your results? Well, you've already written results, put those in there, and then you can start changing those sentences into a more discussion, I'm going to say discussion-y feel, right? Instead of the very, statistical results section, take that sentence if you want from results, stick it in discussion, and then start changing it around so you're explaining it in words rather than with all those numbers. Sometimes it makes you feel a little bit better. I've done this plenty of times because you're not just staring at that blank discussion section. You put a few sentences in and then it sort of gets you going. And then, as I said, for your discussion tips, remember your results can imply or suggest. Never use the word prove or disprove. If your results were not significant, your hypothesis was never proven wrong. You just state that your results did not support your hypothesis. All right, thank you very much.